Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Without transit, I'm lost.
Hard on us elderly handicapped people.
I was late, so I had to take a taxi.
As commuters start moving on Metro Vancouver buses and C-buses again, the province asks a veteran mediator to again try to find a deal between transit supervisors and management. Plus,
your child, brother, sister, mom, dad, friend, or colleague did not deserve to die this way. Their death was preventable.
the highest death rate in a decade. BC's chief coroner again pleads for more action to try to save more lives from toxic drugs. And
tons of tuna swimming around us the whole way.
tough row. A group of marine scientists win a race across the Atlantic Ocean. Half the team is from BC.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. It was a smoother day for transit riders in Metro Vancouver. Buses and C-buses were moving again after a two-day shutdown. But the end of the labor dispute that halted service is nowhere near over. As Michelle Gassoub reports, the province has now appointed a special mediator to try to hammer out a deal.
After 48 hours with no bus service, buses are back up and running as of 3 a.m. this morning. That is great news for the 300,000 people who rely on those services every single day. But in terms of seeing the end of the strike, we are not at the last station just yet.
I just had to get my parents to drive me to school. And it was just kind of rough because they don't usually do that.
Parents giving you a hard time?
Not really, it's just that it was just annoying, you know?
Without transit, I'm lost, so I have some co-workers who have to spend a lot. They live in Tawassum. They have to take a taxi, $160. That's huge. So I'm glad everything is back to normal. Not quite, but I hope so.
Hard on us elderly handicapped people, even the people that aren't handicapped, they had to travel. They probably lost a couple of days worth of work.
I was supposed to go to a doctor's appointment, and I didn't know the bus wasn't running, so I was late. So I had to take a taxi because I noticed 3 times it didn't show up. So I took a cab, so I spent money on cab.
While services operated by Coast Mountain Bus Company are back, the dispute that led to the shutdown is far from over. The province has now appointed Vince Reddy as a special mediator. He'll work for up to 6 days to secure a resolution between the employer and the union. If none is reached, he'll issue non-binding recommendations on February 2nd.
That person has the skills and experience to bring parties together and walk through some of the complex issues that there may be during the dispute, to resolve them, bring parties together. That's the focus, and I'm hopeful and very, very encouraged that there will be a settlement.
Reddy was present at the negotiations that broke down between the employer and the union. The province is confident Reddy, one of BC's top arbitrators, will be able to find a resolution. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
The reason for the labor dispute centers mainly around pay and TransLink's insistence that it can't afford to pay its employees that much more. But how accurate are their claims of financial crisis? Our Justin McElroy has a fact check on the cash flow.
Is TransLink in financial trouble? TransLink wants you to believe so.
Now is not the time. And that's because at TransLink, we are facing a fiscal crisis.
That is CEO Kevin Quinn arguing why they aren't giving in to demands by the QP union that caused a 2-day shutdown to the bus and C-bus system this week. And he made a very specific claim, several times.
TransLink is facing a structural deficit of $4.6 billion over the next 10 years. A $4.6 billion deficit over 10 years.
TransLink says because of that anticipated deficit, they can't give in to union demands. But is it true? Well, sort of, if TransLink does nothing. Let me explain. First, let's do some math. Based on what we know, the two sides seem to be about $5,000 to $10,000 apart in salaries for the workers in question. Now, those workers are about 180 in total, so overall, the sides are about $1 to $2 million apart. Now, in a $2 billion budget, that's a rounding error. But TransLink is making a slightly different argument.
Many of the unions across the TransLink enterprise do look at other union negotiated agreements for either formal Me Too clauses or even informally to ask for what other members got. These ripple effects that would happen on other contracts that, in our estimation, amount to $250 million over a 10-year period.
Now, that ripple effect is a guess. Those new contracts haven't been negotiated yet. But let's assume it's true and they go the union's way. Quinn says it matters because of TransLink's overall financial situation, which, if you've forgotten, is
a $4.6 billion deficit over 10 years.
And here's where that comes from. Traditionally, TransLink got about half its revenue from two main sources: the fares that everyone pays when they get on the system, and the 18.5 cents per liter in gas tax everyone in Metro Vancouver pays for when they go to the gas station. But a smaller percentage of the public is going to the gas station these days because of the rise in electric vehicles. Ridership on buses is still down compared to before the pandemic, and the cost of things keeps going up, which means TransLink is in a financial imbalance. Here is a chart. It shows the combined gas tax and fare revenue they've gotten in the last 7 years, adjusted for inflation, which means there's about a $200 million yearly revenue gap when compared to pre-pandemic times. And if TransLink wants to keep growing like they want to, but they can't find the money to do so, that gap will grow.
We fortunately have been the recipient of provincial and federal government funding that has allowed us to stay stable through the end of 2025. But the fact is that it is not financially responsible to dig that hole any deeper.
Of course, TransLink has options. They could increase the gas tax, or raise fares, or potentially lobby higher levels of government for more taxation tools. Or they could get more one-time infusions of money like they did during the pandemic. So TransLink has lots of cards they could play, but for the moment, they're dealing out one: the message of a financially shaky future, whether the union thinks that's fair game or not. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
It was a chaotic scene in part of Burnaby last night. Part of Kingsway was shut down in both directions near Metro Town after a man was shot and killed. Mounties say it happened around 10:30 on Kingsway, just east of Royal Oak. When police arrived, they found a man suffering from gunshot wounds. First responders tried to save him, but he died at the scene. Investigators believe his killing was targeted, and homicide investigators are now involved. Police are asking for tips or dash cam footage from the area between 9 and 11 p.m. Tuesday night. In Kamloops, police are investigating after they say the remains of a body were found at the scene of a fire. The RCMP says crews were called to what is believed to be a transient camp by the South Thompson River around 10 p.m. Saturday. Yesterday, the remains were found in the debris by a worker at the scene who was cleaning up. Police say today the BC Coroner's Service confirmed the remains to be human. RCMP says officials are working to figure out what happened and identify the victim. There are some signs of post-pandemic recovery within BC's hotel sector. Still, many former workers who lost their jobs in 2020 say they still haven't been hired back. That's in a new report from SFU and the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. The lead authors spoke with CBC's Radio's the early edition this morning about some of the findings.
Every worker that we spoke to, shared about losses in incomes, in employments, and economic strains, from moderate to really extreme challenges that, point to housing and food insecurity among these workers. They spoke of increased workload, room attendants who had their workloads increased like twofold.
Mulragi also notes most workers in the industry are women who are older, racialized immigrants. Seven British Columbians were killed every day by toxic drugs in 2023, double the average for the last 10 years. The grim finding is in the latest data and last update from BC's outgoing coroner. As David Ball reports, it's the highest annual death rate ever recorded.
More than 2,500 families in BC are grieving.
Your child, brother, sister, mom, dad, friend, or colleague did not deserve to die this way. Their death was preventable. Their loss, your loss, is our collective loss.
At her final press conference as BC's chief coroner, Lapointe revealed there was a 5% increase in toxic drug deaths in 2023.
Unless we are willing to act thoughtfully, carefully and with courage to provide a safer supply, more people will suffer and more families will grieve.
The latest report comes 1 year after BC decriminalized small amounts of illegal drugs. Lapointe supported it, but not everyone was on board.
The reckless decriminalization of hard drugs like heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine simply isn't working.
The opposition positioning itself as the solution.
BC United government is going to fix this, and we're going to fix it by saying we're going to invest in treatment and mental health facilities 24/7 where we can take people off the streets.
Drug user advocates say that kind of political rhetoric is dangerous.
It's not just the drugs, but the politics are toxic too. We're just attacking harm reduction, trying to make a moral panic and scapegoat drug users so that they can get into office. You know, they're trying to say safe supply is actually causing the problem instead of the solution to the problem. We know it's the solution to the problem.
The highest death rate in Lapointe's report has been in northern BC, particularly around the city of Terrace, showing that this crisis spares no part of the province. David Ball, CBC News, Vancouver.
Investigators are now trying to piece together the deadly heli-skiing crash north of Terrace. The heli-skiing community calls it a shocking and rare tragedy. Mira Bain says more now on how the industry and local community are coping.
The heli-skiing helicopter crashed Monday afternoon in the mountains surrounding the Rosswood area of North Terrace. It slammed into the side of a mountain. The investigation into what caused the crash is underway by multiple agencies, including the Transportation Safety Board, the RCMP, WorkSafe BC, and the BC Coroner Service. The heli-skiing industry is big business here in Terrace, attracting international clients. However, in the aftermath of the crash, there are once again questions over the safety of the sport. The Industry Association says there are several factors to consider.
Well, you know, there's weather issues, so cloud and wind and things like that, as well as the snow conditions, which are variable. They change, fairly regularly, both through a year and from year to year. And I say those would be the big things for us. And then obviously things like this. I mean, these helicopters are, well maintained. The pilots have got thousands of hours of mountain flying. So, I can't speculate, but it's just so unusual that this would be the kind of thing that would occur.
3 people, including 2 Italian tourists, are confirmed dead. Andreas Vidman, an Italian sportswear executive. The other is Heiner Oberach, from the family of an Italian sporting goods company. RCMP and the BC Coroner Service are not officially identifying the victims so far. 2 people are in serious condition, while 2 others are in critical condition. The mayor of Terrace thanked emergency crews and search and rescue for their quick response.
Really, it's just really sad and tragic to see something like this happen, and it hits more close to home when it's obviously in your backyard. I think community members are hurting. I think the people in the industry are hurting, and I think it's tough on people.
The investigation is expected to take months to complete. Mira Baines, CBC News, Terrace.
After years of delays and big cost overruns, the company behind the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion says crude will begin flowing this spring. The company says it will finish the final stages of tunneling in the Fraser Valley next week. And by February, a section of the pipeline will be filled with about 4.5 million barrels of crude oil. The company says ships will then begin loading tankers in late March or early April. The almost $31 billion project runs from near Edmonton through BC's interior to a marine terminal in Burnaby. Meanwhile, a refinery in Burnaby that was the source of a stench over the region on Sunday will be shut down for about a month. The Parkland fuel refinery says extreme cold weather forced it to pause operations earlier in the month anyway, but it ran into an issue when trying to restart the system on Sunday. The company says it's shutting down fuel processing for about 4 weeks. Vancouver City Council has now approved a policy statement for the Jericho lands development, signaling the city's support for the massive project. It looks to redevelop 36 hectares of land in Point Grey, building a new neighborhood with about 13,000 homes for 24,000 people. Dozens of people showed up at the council meeting ahead of the vote, many speaking against it.
Despite the emphasis on consultation, very little input from the working group was allowed to influence the proponent's plan. The proposal was developed in isolation from, perhaps even in contradiction to, concerns that were expressed throughout the community.
City staff will now create an official development plan. One of Vancouver's largest events is marking a significant milestone this year. The Lunar New Year parade in Chinatown is celebrating 50 years.
1, 2, 3.
Mayor Ken Sim unveiled a neon banner celebrating the event and the Year of the Dragon. A series of these banners will be displayed along East Pender, lighting up the heart of Chinatown. The 50th anniversary parade takes place Sunday, February 11th. Around 100,000 visitors are expected to attend, celebrating the cultural heritage of the community. And CBC Vancouver will be in the parade. How's this for a workout? A team of 4 female marine scientists just won the toughest rowing race in the world across the Atlantic Ocean. And half the team is from here in BC. Through hell and high water, the crew had to keep up that row motion in the ocean for 38 and a half days straight with no support. They call themselves the Salty Science Crew.
Tons of tuna swimming around us the whole way. And at night, they would be illuminated by our navigation lights. So you just felt like you were kind of like being chauffeured across the Atlantic by all of these fish. It was amazing. Tons of flying fish flying out of the water and onto the boat, sometimes smacking you in the face in the middle of the night. It was hilarious. We had some whales come and visit us. We jumped in and swam with dolphins.
All that rowing wasn't for nothing. By winning, they raised more than $250,000 for ocean conservation. Well done. So it is January 24th, if you didn't know. Only 7 days left of this sometimes long, dark, drawn-out month. So we wanted to ask how you're feeling. So we hit the streets and asked Vancouverites how they're handling the weather and post-Christmas grind. Karis Hogg has more.
January, it's been a ride. Let's go talk to some people on the streets of downtown Vancouver and see what they have to say about their January. How's it been going for them?
Our January? Yeah. We are from Brazil. So in January, we came here to Vancouver to study, and it's amazing. Yeah.
I would say it's been pretty grim with the snow and all the strikes that are happening. So hoping for a better February.
Yeah, how have you been doing with the weather swing that we've been having? The minus temperatures, the snow, now rain.
Just taking it day by day.
How did you do with the weather? Like, how's that part of your January been?
I got 2 jackets on. One of them's only a little bit waterproof, so like if I have 2, they kind of helps.
So you're
landscape as well, so just used to working outside.
Oh wow, you landscape, yeah. So this weather, you're okay with January weather?
Yeah, it's not the end of the world.
How has your January been?
Very wet, very cold. Honestly, like I feel like it's been like I go to the gym or try to go to the gym in the morning. I felt like it's been so hard this January for some reason to get up in the morning and go because it's just so dark and so gloomy and you just want to stay in your bed. So I'm going to Hawaii in like 2 weeks, so I'm looking forward to that.
How do you get to February? How do you get from January 1st to February 1st?
Just keep pushing. Get up every day and just keep going.
Just one foot in front of the other?
Yeah, one foot in front of the other. Take it as it comes.
Very rainy and cold. I want a sun. I want to go to Greece somewhere.
You know, snacks really help too. And you're good about handing those out in the newsroom, Darius Mandavi.
Oh,
thank you.
That's what I
between
do.
you and I, exactly.
Yeah.
How's it been for you in January?
Oh, not bad. Lots of excuses to, stay inside, read a book, watch TV.
Practice hermiting. Yeah,
exactly.
There you go.
Unfortunately, if that's what you're looking for, I don't have great news because the temperatures are coming up. It will still be wet. So, if you're the Wicked Witch of the West, you might have an excuse to stay inside. But otherwise, you're going to be a little bit warmer over the next few days because across BC, we're going to see temperatures come up at least a few degrees. Much more pronounced up north. We can see that those temperatures really starting to come up. Here in Vancouver, another 4 or 5 degrees of warming, which puts us quite a bit above seasonal. Really across the province, again, anywhere from 5 to 15 degrees above seasonal late this weekend into early next week. So lots of temperatures coming up. In terms of precipitation, also lots coming our way, staying pretty consistent until tomorrow night. And then we see a little bit of a reprieve overnight Thursday into Friday. We may see that come a little bit earlier tomorrow, late afternoon to evening. We might see that rain start to ease off a little bit sooner. But for the most part, that's our break. And then sticking around through much of Friday, but then returning later in the day, we see another system roll in, and this one's going to be a little bit more consistent. But the big story is that this is pretty much all going to be rain across the south coast, including here on the local mountains. We see a bit of a mix over the next couple of days, but those temperatures keep rising. The freezing levels also keep rising, which means lots of rain on the way, and not great news for anybody who's hoping to go skiing or snowboarding. Okay, we'll check in later. Darius, thanks very much. Thank you. To a disturbing report in the Globe and Mail now. It says 5 players with Canada's 2018 World Junior Hockey team have been told to surrender to police in London, Ontario. As Karen Pauls reports, the group is expected to face charges of sexual assault.
In a social media post, London police said they understand there's significant public interest in relation to a sexual assault investigation dating back to 2018. They anticipate a news conference on February 5th.
I think probably the degree of public interest and scrutiny has made them perhaps more reluctant to speak before things are settled.
Court documents revealed police believe they have reasonable grounds to lay charges. In a statement of claim, the alleged victim, known as EM, said she met some of the hockey players at a downtown London bar during a Hockey Canada event and went to one player's hotel room. But she alleged the player allowed 7 others to enter the room without her knowledge or consent. She describes a series of degrading sexual acts while she was too intoxicated to consent. Police investigated but closed the case months later. The woman sued Hockey Canada and 8 unnamed players for $3.5 million. Hockey Canada settled out of court using a reserve fund partially funded by children's registration fees. The scandal rocked hockey in Canada, with parliamentary hearings, resignations, and sponsors pulling out. In the wake of all that, police reopened the case in 2022. Now, reaction to news that charges may be imminent.
My thoughts are with the alleged victim, but it's good to get to the end of this situation. It's tarnished the image of Hockey Canada.
Coming up, the use of AI in forecasting, how new models are being used to predict the weather, and why it could spark a revolution in how we get our daily forecasts. That's next. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. A blind woman in Saskatoon says she hopes her experience can be a learning moment after a restaurant refused to let her guide dog in last month. The eatery has since sincerely apologized, but as Moira Whiten reports, one advocate says this still happens far too often.
Cheryl Dolan was looking forward to a meal here with her husband, her sister, and brother-in-law, until the staff at Tamarind Restaurant told her that her guide dog couldn't join them.
Right away, the 2 young ladies at the front desk said, no, you can't bring a dog in. And I've had that kind of experience before, but in the past, I've always just said, yes, it is a rule of Canada that we are allowed to bring our guide dogs, seeing eye dogs, into any public place. And they ran to the back and got the owner, and the owner came out and he said, absolutely not in my restaurant.
The former voice instructor lost her vision 30 years ago as a result of type 1 diabetes. She says she showed the man her registration for 11-year-old Hudson, but he didn't look at it.
All the times I've been in other parts of Canada, in the States, I have never, ever felt discriminated against. And it was not a nice feeling.
Oh, one of the principal feelings initially was shock and surprise.
Yeah.
Like, how could you not know this?
Saskatchewan's Human Rights Code prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities, and the province's Human Rights Commission says service animals must be allowed in all public spaces, including restaurants. Tamarind says it deeply regrets what happened and will increase staff training on guide dogs. The staff members on duty were students, new to the restaurant, and they were hired to do their first job in Canada. They were not aware of the proper protocol for registered service animals. We would like to extend our sincerest apologies to the couples and their service dog for the unfortunate incident that occurred. We want to assure you that we are taking immediate steps to address and rectify the situation. One advocate says education is key.
The guide dogs are an integral part of them being independent and being able to go about their day. And it's frustrating for people, and it's degrading, and it does take a toll because it does happen more than it should.
The Dolans agree. They have filed a human rights complaint hoping to prevent future issues.
Don't take this as being a punishment, but as a learning experience.
And we've heard that the food is really, really good. And we certainly don't want their business to suffer.
Tamarind has invited the couple back for dinner, free of charge. The Dolans say they look forward to it, though they're happy to pay. Moira Whiten, CBC News.
This week, we've been focusing on the promises and pitfalls of artificial intelligence. Despite the issues around deep fakes and cheating on essays, they do hold tremendous promises across all fields of science, including weather forecasting, which is one thing our science and climate expert Darius Mahdavi knows very well. Before we get into AI, Darius, easy for me to say, I think even the weather models you show us every day can be a bit of a mystery. How do they actually work?
Yes, great question. So whether you're a human or a supercomputer or an artificial intelligence, you just start your forecast from the same place. So to know where you're going, you've got to know where you've been. So we start with an analysis of the current conditions. We use data from weather stations and buoys and satellites, and with all of that together, we can know have a current analysis of what it's looking like right now. Now, traditional models, also known as numerical weather prediction models, take those current conditions, and then they use some really complicated math to simulate real-world physics and then run that forward over however many hours. As you might imagine, that's quite resource intensive, which is why it takes an array of supercomputers hours to put out a forecast. But AI models, on the other hand, are basically mimics. They've been trained on decades of climate data and modeling, and instead of trying to predict the future by rigidly applying the laws of physics, they do it based on how similar setups have played out in the past. And even though training them takes a ton of computing power, once they're ready, you can run them on your laptop and get a forecast in minutes.
So they start from the same place, but they differ a lot in between. How do the results actually compare?
Honestly, the accuracy is shockingly similar. And according to experts, that's a testament to how quickly the technology has developed.
It's amazing that they can mimic what the traditional models do. And nearly all of that is really over the last year. The technology has come on in leaps and bounds. If you and I had this conversation a year ago, I would probably have said that's not possible. And suddenly here we are today, and it is.
So that was the director of U of T School of the Environment and a professor of computer science, which shows you just how important these models are nowadays. Now, some of the claims from these AI companies might be a little bit overblown, but in most cases, including extreme weather like heat waves or hurricanes, they do seem to be at least as good. But instead of telling, let me show. You can see here a comparison between the traditional model and an AI-based model. And so this is the temperature and wind direction forecast over the next few days from both of those models. On the top, we had that traditional model, and in the bottom, we had an AI-based model from Google's DeepMind. And now this is something, the top one there is something I often show during a forecast. I use the European model all the time. And you can see how well the AI model compensates. But one thing you might notice, or compares, sorry. But one thing you might notice is that the forecast from the AI model doesn't give quite as much detail, and that's because of the data it's trained on. Now, the only real limitation for how fine-grained a traditional model can be is how much computing power you have, because it's just running the physics. But for an AI-based model, it really comes down to the resolution of the training data, and that's a lot harder to improve.
So out of all of this, are you going to be replaced by AI? And for the record, don't go yet, okay?
Oh, thank you, Dan. First of all, don't worry. Does AI have a face like this? Yes, it can. If thanks to deepfakes. It can also pick a much better one. But seriously, this is really only another tool in forecasters' arsenal. Now, as any meteorologist will tell you, there's a big difference between the output of a model and a proper forecast, which is why even though traditional models are freely available online, I'm still here. Now, not to mention, especially with our changing climate, it's going to be more important than ever to have people interpreting the results of those models.
So if you show it a weather condition that's like nothing it's seen in that ERA5 data set, it won't know what to do with it. It will make some guess, but the chances are it's going to be a lot worse than if you take the traditional model and show it that condition and compute forward.
But there's still so much promise here, especially if we bring together traditional and AI-based models. So there's a long way to go. We've come a long way already, but fortunately, no AI can steal my fun facts, Dan.
No kidding. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
It's been 6 months since the Bank of Canada last adjusted the overnight interest rate, and today it did nothing. The impact after the break.
Thank you.
Blythe Martin grew up in Summerside and worries about the future of Prince County Hospital. She says cutting services will have an impact on all islanders by putting more burden on other island hospitals, the EMS service, and doctors' offices.
I mean, nobody ever plans to be in the ICU, but the reality of it is there are 8 beds in that unit and they are always full. So closing that, there will be repercussions on all islanders.
Health PEI says a shortage of doctors, nurses, and respiratory therapists will force it to transfer even more critically ill patients to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Charlottetown, an hour's drive away. Today, officials with the health authority said they do have more staff coming, mainly temporary travel staff. But Health PEI is carrying on with its plan to transfer what they call intermediate-level patients to the hospital in Charlottetown. They say that's likely to start happening over the next couple of weeks. Martin is scared once services are lost, they'll never be restored.
We're going in the absolute backwards direction. I think at this time what we really need to do is streamline the process of recruiting people to work here and then working at retaining those good, talented staff that we do have.
Martin is not alone. Many in Summerside are worried about the future of their hospital.
I think it's a concern. People living locally in this region want to have access to the healthcare that they deserve and need. We just want the best healthcare for our family and our community.
What I'm hearing is, why isn't there anything being done about it? You know, we know that we are in a crisis in our medical system, but there needs to be more done about it.
What we're seeing a lot now is just really basic fear. I think people are fearful of what's happening. It's really easy for us as a society to come up with all that's wrong. Finding solutions is a lot harder, but I think that people are at a place that they want to save this resource in our community.
Martin says back when the ICU was downgraded last year, people took comfort in the idea that it was just temporary. Now she says the hospital is facing another reduction in services.
Queen Elizabeth Hospital already has, I mean, we see it in the news all the time, very lengthy wait times, long waiting lists, stretched to the limit, more patients than they can accommodate. So it's definitely a concern when we're taking the sickest of the sick patients from Western PEI and then transporting them to Charlottetown and asking them to care for them.
Wayne Thibodeau, CBC News, Summerside.
As expected, the Bank of Canada is keeping its key interest rate at 5%. The bank says its policy is working in the fight against inflation, and it's now focusing on how much longer it will keep rates high. As Nisha Patel reports, the bank has held steady with the rate for the fourth time in a row.
For the fourth time in a row, the Bank of Canada held its key interest rate steady at 5%.
There's a clear sense that, yes, inflation is coming down, but we remain concerned about the persistence of underlying inflation. Monetary policy is working, but we need to let it keep working.
But for the first time, Governor Tiff Macklem signaled rate hikes are likely over, though he avoided giving a timeline for interest rate cuts.
I worry that putting it on a calendar is, it's a false sense of precision. We're going to have to see how inflation evolves.
Higher interest rates make it more expensive to borrow money, and they are having an impact. Consumer spending has slipped, the job market has slowed, the economy has stalled. While the path has been a bit bumpy, overall inflation has cooled, from a peak of 8.1% to 3.4% over the past year and a half.
We haven't been pushed into a recession. I mean, we've seen unemployment rate, ticking up certainly since the spring, but we haven't seen the kind of job losses we normally see when you have this big, giant tightening cycle.
Still, risks like shipping disruptions in the Red Sea threaten to throw the fight against inflation off track. Experts say the Bank of Canada is in a tricky spot.
If you start lowering too soon and inflation starts to pick back up, then again, you run this risk of inflation getting out of hand and then destabilizing those expectations.
So there won't be any interest rate relief for many Canadian households just yet. Most market watchers think the central bank will start cutting rates by July. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
The lone survivor of a plane crash in the Northwest Territories is now in hospital. 2 flight crew and 4 other passengers were killed on their way to the diamond mine where they worked. There's grief in the town of Fort Smith, the community the plane departed from, the territorial flag flying at half-staff. Yellowknife is where we find Juanita Taylor, who is speaking with families and communities.
There is heartache in Fort Smith.
It was a huge loss yesterday, huge.
This convenience store has become a gathering place for those who just need to be around one another.
In one incident, having so much loss, I just knew it was going to be difficult for people to handle that.
They are only beginning to process what happened just outside their town Tuesday, when a plane crash took the lives of 2 flight crew and 4 passengers on their way to work at the Diavik Diamond Mine, including Howie Benwell. His sister, Crystal Benwell, told CBC News that he celebrated his 30th birthday just weeks ago, a local musician with a great sense of humor.
The coroner service would like to express our condolences to the family and the community of Fort Smith during this very tragic and difficult time.
Wednesday, confirmation of what many people from Fort Smith already knew. Of the 7 people on board the Northwestern Airlines flight, only 1 person survived. Kurt McDonald, a young dad, was identified by his own father. He was airlifted to hospital in Yellowknife. According to the Transportation Safety Board, the plane crashed just before 7 a.m. local time, about 500 meters from the end of the runway at the Fort Smith Regional Airport. Northerners all across the territory are feeling the loss, like in Hay River, 300 kilometers away.
I don't know yet who was on the flight, whether it's people I know, but I know that regardless, it's going to be friends, family of people that I know I care about.
Scott Cloutier has opened up the youth center for those needing support.
We're only a 3-hour drive away from Fort Smith, so again in the north, that's kind of like the next community over. So the ties between Fort Smith and Hay River are very, very strong.
Juanita Taylor reporting. A pair of unhappy Air Canada passengers has won their small claims case against the airline. The Nova Scotia couple's connecting flight from Toronto to New York was canceled in July of 2022. As Angela McIver explains, the airlines claimed it was beyond the company's control due to the COVID pandemic.
Vicky Lynn and Terry Black are getting most of what they fought for, $1,583. Their flight to New York City 2 summers ago landed 7 hours late, shaving an entire afternoon and evening off their 3-day sightseeing trip.
I'm really happy with the decision, and I'm also happy that we decided to pursue it.
You know, we felt it was the right thing to do.
When delays are within the control of an airline and not related to a safety issue, passengers are entitled to $700 for a 6 to 9 hour delay. Air Canada instead offered the Black couple a $300 e-coupon. They declined.
The air passenger rights regulations clearly state that we're entitled to cash, that we're entitled to $700, and that there's no expiration. So the e-coupons had an expiration on them. All this spoke to us that they were just not willing to comply with the regulations.
The airline blamed the delay on crew constraints due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but Nova Scotia's small claims court adjudicator decided that 2 years into the pandemic, crew staffing was within the airline's control, and noted the airline didn't present any evidence to support its case. The adjudicator also ruled against Air Canada's attempts to stay the proceeding while other cases play out across the country. The Blacks say the process with Air Canada was intimidating, but that only pushed them forward.
It just felt like, really, for $1,400, they already spent that on lawyers in the first couple of hours of legal service. So that annoyed me.
Air passenger rights advocate Gabor Lukács applauded the Blacks for not agreeing to a settlement or non-disclosure agreement.
This is money which is owed to the passenger under the law, and airlines should not be allowed to cover up their wrongdoing with just paying off some victims.
In an email to CBC, Air Canada says it's reviewing the decision. Angela McIver, CBC News, Halifax.
Donald Trump is one step closer to securing the Republican presidential nomination. The former president won the New Hampshire primary, taking his second straight nomination win. As Katie Simpson explains, despite that victory, Trump's frustration is growing.
Donald Trump's grip on the Republican Party base remains firm, unwavering, and at this point in the race to become the Republican nominee for president, he's got a big lead. And he's angry. He is frustrated that he continues to be challenged by Nikki Haley. She also is running to top the Republican ticket for president. But at this point, she is trailing significantly behind Donald Trump. She did have a better showing in New Hampshire than she did in Iowa, but she's still trailing him by 10%. She says she's not going to give up. She's going to push ahead to the next big contest. Everyone will be watching what she can do in South Carolina. It's her home state. If she can't put up a strong showing there, there are questions about whether her candidacy is viable and whether it will be time for her to pack it all in. We spent some time at the Trump Victory Watch Party in New Hampshire, and the supporters we spoke with were thrilled.
It's unbelievable. Trump's the best. He's the only guy we can trust. He's the only one that is not bought and paid for. President Trump funds 76% of his own campaign.
I'm glad to hear that he won, so now it's 2-0. Now we go on to Nevada next, and then South Carolina.
One question that I asked over and over and over again, if there's anything that Donald Trump has done to give them pause to reconsider their support for Donald Trump. And the overwhelming response was no. And they listed off all of the reasons why they like Donald Trump. Largely, they think he's done a great job for the economy when he was president. They don't like Joe Biden. They want him to go back to the White House and clean up America. However, they also leaned into a number of conspiracy theories, many people citing how it's unfair that the 2020 election was stolen from him. That's not true, but it's a lie that Trump spreads at his rallies. They also talk about the criminal charges he's facing, and time after time after time, supporters would cite how it's unfair. They think that he's being targeted by the Justice Department, by the Biden administration, because he's doing so well in the polls. Conspiracy theories and anger really dominate a number of these events, and it was certainly on display at his events in New Hampshire. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Concord, New Hampshire.
Training to help those on thin ice. We hit the shores of the Thompson River with some firefighters for ice rescue training. You'll want to see this.
This is where you will find Gordy Cox for hours at a time every winter. He lives across the street and has been shoveling the snow, flooding the ice, and even hanging up lights for 28 years.
I'm almost like a kid in a candy store. I can't wait for the first snowfall. I can't wait for when the temperature dips to come out here and start preparing for the next season.
But there hasn't been a rink here for the last 2 winters. The pond had filled with sediment and weeds, and there wasn't enough water to form ice.
Yeah, people were really concerned in Stratford, and like I said, we wouldn't have been the first community in PEI to lose a very cherished pond.
It was dredged last summer, and the water started to rise again.
It's kind of magical. Like I said, I live around the corner, and you go by it about 500 times, in 2 weeks. And there's always somebody out here, somebody pushing the snow out of the way. When he got lights, it was really amazing. Cords running across the street and everything, and it's mythical, almost iconic,
The rinks have been featured in artwork, and Zach McEwen, one of the kids who grew up playing hockey here, is now in the NHL. Cox says he is now getting to meet the second generation learning to skate here on the pond.
It's really neat. The other day there was a guy down here. He said he remembered when he was younger, he always down here, and as he said on Gordy's pond. And now he had his 4-year-old with him.
The official name is Moore's Pond, but most in the neighborhood call it Gordy's Rink.
That's what everybody calls it. You tell people you're going over to Moore's Pond, they say, "Where are you, Alberton or someplace?" But you say you're going by Gordy's Rink, and everybody knows what it is, yeah. And he's just Gordy,
Gordy Cox retired a couple of years ago from his job as a school counselor. He was elected in 2022 to Stratford Town Council, but says he still has plenty of time for the rinks.
As long as I'm living right across the street, I think I'll always be over here. I have no plans in the near future of stepping away, yeah.
Nancy Russell, CBC News, Stratford.
Warmer temperatures this winter have limited outdoor skating in many parts of this country, raising concerns about the safety of open ice. In Halifax, though, officials have not been testing to see if the ice is strong enough to safely support skaters. The CBC's Kayla Hounsell tells us what's behind that decision.
Hitting the ice on a pond or lake. It is a national pastime steeped in nostalgia. But now the tradition itself might be on thin ice.
Now we rarely get an extended period on the lake. It's later than it used to be, and the duration of the time where it's safe to skate is shorter.
So Halifax has decided to stop testing the ice thickness to see whether it's safe for skating. Chocolate Lake used to be packed with skaters. Normally McLeod has lived here for 26 years.
We've been able to see climate change right out our back door.
Across the country, there have been warnings about thin ice. In Ottawa, 2 teens drowned. Now, in Halifax, this regional councillor says the decision to stop checking for safety is a practical one.
For the last several years, we've averaged 1 day of available skating. Last year there was none. So the program has really just become irrelevant because basically the ice is never safe to skate on anymore.
7 centimeters or less, you should not be out there at all. And that's a good chunk of our winter now.
CBC meteorologist Ryan Snodden says there are just not enough consecutive days below freezing.
It's
3 days here, 4 days here at the most, and that's usually only 1 or 2 times in the entire winter.
McLeod has the records to prove it.
Basically, I started keeping records 25 years ago, and the owner before me kept records before that. So I have 33 years.
Back then, the lake was often frozen in December.
Last year it was February 5th.
Oh, this one's February 11th.
And this one's February 4th.
Her husband checks the ice himself, so they'll continue skating on the rare occasion it's thick enough.
I do feel sad that there will be kids growing up who won't really know what it's like to just pop on the skates and head to the lake.
A sign climate change isn't just causing dramatic weather events, but also affecting everyday life. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
Well, think twice about walking on ice and watch out for pets. That's the message from BC rescue workers. They say this time of year ice can be hazardous because of changing temperatures. Have a look.
If you fall in the water, how long do you have before things start to go really south?
Without any gear, this type of weather, you probably got a couple of minutes at the most.
But today we're doing technical ice operations. We're working on the Thompson River downtown Kamloops, and we're just going to be going through the rescue basics.
It's important for us to keep our skills up because this time of the year there are people on the ice walking the shores and out with their pets. Sometimes their pets stray out onto the ice, and there has been times where either pets go in the water or people go in the water trying to get their pets.
A couple of days ago there was no water visible, solid ice, and now you can see a couple days later open areas, weak areas, and kind of slushy ice.
With the warmer temperatures and the moving water underneath, you may not notice that it's thinned underneath and has some bare spots, especially covered with snow too. You may not see the open holes. If you're out near bodies of water and there's ice, make sure if you're going to try and go out on the ice, you know how thick it is. Do some testing with it. If you're with your pets, try and keep them on a leash to keep them off the ice shelf so that they don't fall through and you don't have to try and go in and rescue them.
You know, the thickness of the ice will vary. As you can see out this way behind us, we've got open water, thin, slushy ice, some snow-covered ice, and then other areas, where it's actually exposed.
You want at least probably 3-4 inches to be a go out on, but all ice has different consistency, so just because it's thick, it doesn't mean it's strong either.
At any given area or time right now, you could fall through the ice or a weak spot.
We encourage people not to go near the water at this time of the year.
Some good advice there, Darius Madabi.
Especially this year, especially in the weeks ahead, because we're getting very warm. So not only no ice, no snow really expected. So I hope people enjoyed the snowfall that we had last week, because for now it's looking like a lot of rain. Right now you can see on the radar only in the highest elevations on the island and here in the lower mainland are we seeing snow at all, and it's going to continue to shrink, that area that gets the snow over the next few days. I'd expect that by early next week we might not see any snow as systems roll in at all. It could be entirely rain, with the exception of some extremely small areas on the island and here on the lower mainland. Freezing levels rising, going to be I'd say above where the local mountains are soon. So be prepared for that. Now, I do want to mention in the interior, still a decent amount of snowfall coming, particularly today in parts of the southern interior, in the Okanagan, maybe getting up to the Thompson, and in the valley. We were getting some pretty consistent showers in places like Kelowna and Vernon, where it is, a little bit warmer and they get more of those showers. So pretty consistently wet, which means that over the next week, I'm going to have to start thinking about switching back to showing mostly rain totals across much of southern BC. Up in the north, you can see still a decent amount of snowfall, but all along the coast, we're seeing the place or how close to the shore we're getting that snow versus rain move further and further east, because we're getting just more of those warm temperatures and more of that precipitation falling as rain. But if we zoom into the south coast, plenty of rain coming over the next few days, even though very little snow. You can see that here in Vancouver, expecting anywhere really from 20 to 30 millimeters. On the east coast of the island, looking closer to 10 to 20 millimeters over the next 48 hours, and the west coast of the island still expecting a decent amount, but a lot of it has fallen already. But again, this is the next 48 hours. As we get into the weekend, I'd expect a lot more to come. We have a very prolonged wet period coming between, I'd say, late weekend into mid next week, where we're going to be getting a lot of systems rolling through. So be prepared for that, even though for now it looks like we're getting a lot of rain. it probably won't compare. It'll be a pretty mild systems that are rolling through, but they're going to be very consistent as we get into next week. But for now, a few breaks in the rain, as we'll see in a second. In terms of conditions across the province, looks very active, but for the most part, particularly north of, I'd say, well, really actually throughout the entire interior, is really just a chance of that precipitation. I'd say for most places, just a scattered fall, and we're not going to see too much more activity beyond that. And here in Vancouver, it's a similar story over the next few days. We have a bunch of rain coming, but at different times during the day, and then the consistent rainfall doesn't come till the weekend.
Okay. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
An ocean battle caught on camera. After the break, more on the two big players facing off in the deep.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. With the changes to how Canada is able to access journalism online and on social media, we want to assure you that when you're looking for CBC News, you'll always be able to find us. Wherever you are in BC, local news, breaking stories, and the latest from around the world is at your fingertips any time of the day with the free CBC News app and online at cbcnews.ca. Download the CBC News app and stay connected wherever you are.
It was a battle of ocean heavyweights. A marine biologist out on a dive came across an astonishing scene.
And the whole encounter was caught on video. Have a look.
We decided to start heading back to shore, and then a seal just zipped by us. And we were like, oh, that's a pretty rare sight, right? We don't see seals quite often while we're scuba diving. So I used my light to sort of scan the horizon, and I saw this seal was sort of vertical, and it was kind of pulling at something off a rock. You know, normally seals would swim off, but it didn't really care about our presence. We realized that it was actually attacking a giant Pacific octopus. Normally, those large octopus are hiding in crevices, but this one was just out in the open. So the seal, you know, thought, hey, this would be a nice snack. The seal went up for, you know, to catch its breath and came back down. So I guess the octopus thought, okay, this is my time to get away. So you can see it in the video, it actually swims right in front of us as the seal comes back down and chases it. And what octopus do is they release some ink to try to evade their predators. But the seal just kind of, you can see it kind of swimming through the ink, and yeah, unfortunately it does find the octopus, and then they go through a bit of a battle there. And but to my knowledge, this is the first time that this has ever been captured on camera while scuba diving underwater. So this is pretty rare and very exciting to watch. Our hearts were beating pretty quickly.
No kidding. Wow. Took off an arm, too, with a limb of the octopus. Fun fact from me, not him, octopi can regrow their limbs, but it doesn't, if detached, grow another octopus.
Wow.
There you go.
I did not know that fact.
Not bad. It's not fun. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I leave those to you.
Thank you. That's yeah. I want to get replaced by AI, but maybe by you. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. See you then.